Good evening, Rowan. It's the 8th of October 2016 and it's about midnight. And obviously, I'm making you my usual video before the weekend to reassure you I won't be seducing any priests over the weekend so you can relax. Because obviously, I'm saving myself for my beloved, who's so handsome and gorgeous and wonderful and a brilliant theologian, and he's so sexy, and he's got the most wonderful, sexy North Wales accent, which he's always whispering sweet nothings in my ear with that sexy voice. And he's a brilliant theologian as well, so he's nothing at all like you, especially not with those magnificent feet. Anyway, I thought we could continue our chat about the question and answer session that you did on the 19th of September 2016 at St Martin in the Fields Church, when you thought I was going to be in the audience to arrest you for terrorism because you're a terrorist according to UK law. So I'm still on the question and answer session from this lecture, this bizarre lecture that you gave that was supposed to be about global ethics, but really it was threatening to kill me if I didn't have sex with you, and talking generalised crap as usual, and inventing new words. And we're actually on the subject of redefining words as well this evening, so I hope you like my dictionary there in front of the camera. I haven't actually got an English dictionary here. But I have got a Spanish English dictionary, but so that was the best I could do. And you actually redefine the word behovely later on in the video clips that I'm going to show. Well, unfortunately, the word behovely wasn't in the Spanish English dictionary, but don't worry, I've done a slideshow with the definition of it later on, with some online dictionary definitions. So you don't have to worry about that. But in the meantime, you'll have to make do with the verb behoove or behove. So you keep looking at that, and obviously you're fluent in Spanish, aren't you? So it'll be very helpful looking at this dictionary here, along with the 11 other languages that you're supposed to speak. So you might learn a couple of new words of vocabulary there. So without further ado, I'm going to go on to talking about the things that you said in the couple of clips I'm going to show this evening. So someone asks a rather long-winded question, which I haven't shown in the clip because it does go on for quite some time. And you summarise this question saying, how can the church start listening more rather than preaching? The question is more in the context of politics, really, rather than religion as such, because the questioner refers to the Brexit vote and things of that nature. So you summarise the question, how can the church start listening more rather than preaching? So you say, I think a church that's doing its job is a place where people can come in the expectation that they will be listened to. So not like the Church of England then, in my experience. In my experience, it's a place where you can go to be terrorised and sexually harassed and hounded around the country and around foreign countries, and have you make up a pack of lies about me and spread them about the world behind my back, and not even confront me to my face with your so-called concerns. In fact, you said that you were supporting me and that anyone who wasn't supporting me had something wrong with them. And I've got that in writing on your headed note paper with your squiggle of a signature at the end of it, so don't bother denying it. Because you wanted me to think that you were my only friend in the world, and if you turned everyone else against me, then that would bring me under your control. So that was why you were behaving in that way. And it's a very common characteristic of psychopaths that they launch smear campaigns behind people's backs, particularly behind the back influx of people who they feel threatened by because they know that the person isn't taken in by them and all their crap and narcissistic delusions. And also the person is generally more competent than them, so that's very threatening. In fact, nearly everybody's more competent than psychopaths because they're very good on bullshit and very bad on performance. So you say that if the church is doing its job, it's a place where people can come in the expectation that they will be listened to. I think a church that's doing its job will create the kind of forum, the kind of environment where that's possible. It will encourage its clergy and laity to make those spaces, and you emphasise that. So you're talking astrophysically again, aren't you? But I've put a clip together about that later on. And of course, it won't just sit and wait for people to come. You emphasise that as well. I wonder what you could mean. It will try and attend to the local community in such a way that it discovers where the conversations happen locally and see what can be done to go and be part of that. So if you're thinking about a parochial system, then the people who are going to the church are usually people from the local community anyway. So you're talking as if it's kind of an alien species who's parachuted into the neighbourhood. I mean, this is generally true of the clergy, who might as well be an alien species. Especially in working class areas, because you never find any working class Anglican clergy, because people like you are too busy trying to screw us, aren't you? You know, I never heard a single member of clergy who spoke with the same accent as me until I joined the Catholic Church. So there you are. That's all the helping of the poor that you people do. So, you said, and of course it won't just sit and wait for people to come in. It will try and attend to the local community in such a way that it discovers where conversations happen locally and see what can be done to go and be part of that. So if people are from the local community anyway, generally, which they generally are in relation to parish churches, but maybe not to city centre churches or cathedrals, they would already be part of that community anyway, wouldn't they? They'd already be part of the conversations and the things that were going on in that community, if any such thing was indeed going on at all. And I'm rather suspicious of your interest in wanting the church to influence people in society anyway, and I've put a clip together about that later on as well. So you then say, I'm thinking of, again, back to my days as a bishop in South Wales. Well, don't forget that you're completely null and utterly void, will you? So you're thinking back to your days as a bishop in South Wales. And two rather remarkable experiments in the Anglican Church. No, actually, one was in the United Reformed Church in South Wales, one in the Anglican Church. Both essentially drop-in centres. It's you saying here, actually. Drop-in centres, cafes in council estates, which were run on the principle that people would come in and be listened to. So I've come across this attitude in the Anglican Church before, that people on council estates are just waiting for Anglicans to go and listen to them. Because obviously there's hardly any Anglicans on council estates, because you're largely a bunch of posh twats who really look down on working class people. Well, that's my experience anyway. I've never met a bunch of people, a section of society, so stuck up as Anglicans. And if you mention this to them, they'll say, oh, we don't think about social class, we're a mixed bunch here, everybody's welcome and that, but we disapprove of the way you think and act. They don't say that, they just communicate it by passive-aggressive means. But obviously you were puppeteering all of that behind my back, weren't you? So maybe people wouldn't have been like that normally, but that was my experience, and I was supposed to feel inferior, I think. But I just thought, what a bunch of stuck-up twats. I really did. Listening to them calling people on council estates white trash and stuff like that, which is something that I heard in the church in Headingley. So that's my experience of Anglicanism in relation to council estates. And then I did also know a member of clergy in Bristol who was a Anglican priest on a council estate, and I did visit her once. And while I was visiting her, a member of the local community came barging in, who this Anglican priest told me was very involved in the church, and apparently ran a lot of drama groups for children, and she was very good with children, she said. And then later on mentioned that all her 5 children were heroin addicts. So I don't know what look came over my face, but she said, oh, well, she's very good with children, except with her own children. So you see, the thing is that people who live on council estates don't really want someone who's got 5 children who are heroin addicts looking after their children, because they don't want their children to be going in that direction. So you tend to invite and promote very dysfunctional people in the church and put them in charge of other people, and then ordinary people who just want a decent life don't want anything to do with that, because they don't want their children turning into heroin addicts, for example, in relation to this incident. So this is just complete madness, and this is my experience of Anglicanism in relation to the poor, that they like poor people to be very needy because it makes them feel worthwhile and like they're saving the world and stuff like that. But if you start asserting yourself and saying you've got some very snobbish attitudes here, which I never did quite so bluntly, but I did hint at it from time to time, then that was always my problem, you see. I needed my attitude correcting. So I don't have to deal with this crap largely in the Catholic Church, because we're all riffraff and immigrants in the Catholic Church. So I'm much more at home there with all the riffraff, immigrants and jippos in the Catholic Church. So that's another reason I won't be coming back to the Church of England. So don't bother doing good on council estates, because the majority of people on council estates think you're a bunch of wankers, to be quite frank, and they're not wrong either. Patronising and arrogant, and intended to convert people into having narcissistic middle-class attitudes. I wouldn't say that all middle-class people are narcissistic, but you do tend to find a lot of them gravitate into the Church of England, in my experience. And as a matter of fact, in case you think I'm just generally hostile to Anglicanism, I didn't really have the same experience in the church in Wales. In fact, I preferred the church in Wales, and I would have never left if it hadn't been for all the problems caused for me there, because I preferred the church in Wales to the Church of England, because I didn't find people so stuck up there. So it's not a general hostility towards Anglicanism, because even though I found the experience I had in Wales more traumatic overall, because I was much younger and I'd never had to deal with anything like that before, I still preferred the church in Wales to the Church of England. And it's because you don't get as many people who want to save the peasants in the church in Wales. People don't, in my experience, have quite such a condescending and arrogant attitude, and I found that the majority of people were actually very kind to me, other lay people I mean, and some members of clergy. So then you say, and there are other contexts, of course, where you look for those contexts, as I say, where people go and converse and where people do speak. I don't really know what you're talking. I don't really know what you're talking about here. I think this is more noise pollution. So you say, I think it's crucial for the church to learn how to discern where those places are to equip people as it best can to go and do that work. Otherwise, yes, people will feel unheard and understandably resentful. So I don't really know who you're talking about here. Are we still on the people on the council estates who patronising middle class Anglican clergy think they're saving? Is it those people that you're talking about? I don't, because I'm not quite sure that the majority of people in England are waiting for members of the Church of England to turn up and listen to them. I don't think they actually care too much. Why would it help anyway if Anglicans were listening to them? It wouldn't really help. And quite often they don't understand the context of what people are saying on council estates, and they tend to reward the most dysfunctional people to the detriment of other members of the community. And then people are quite hostile to the church because they see the people who are causing all the problems there being given an overinflated sense of importance. So you then say, the church will often feel resentful that it's not getting its message across. So I don't know what the message is, because you're not a Christian, are you? So, I mean, the real thing that the church, I mean the real church, not the pretend church, people who are pretending they're Christians but really just like church life, would be to preach the gospel to people, to tell people what the gospel is, so that these people can become Christians if they want to. And I appreciate that people don't want other people ramming their religion down their throat all the time. But personally, I would rather someone try to convert me to their religion than condescendingly interfere in my life and think they were going to solve all my problems because they imagine that they're somehow superior, which is the attitude I tended to come across in the Church of England. And also at the moment, I mean, everybody on the entire planet, it seems, thinks they're solving all my problems, when the reality is they're causing all my problems. So this is my experience of being listened to by people who presume that they're helping me. And of course, you only wanted to screw me anyway, didn't you? So you weren't even helping me badly. You were actually trying to harm me. So then you say, and yet, having seen on the ground what that can mean when something else goes forward. I don't know what that means. You know, I do feel that it's possible for neither of those things to happen. I think that that's people not feeling heard and the church not feeling heard. So it's possible for neither of those things to happen, for people to feel heard and for the church to feel we've said something of what we want to say. Well, of course, the church is a kind of a collective, isn't it, really, because it's a group of people. It's not able, the church isn't able to feel in the way an individual would. So maybe members of the church may be able to feel we've said something of what we want to say, but of course the church can't feel that because groups of people do not have one feeling, do they? They may share an opinion or share a belief or something like that, but you're attributing to a group something which only individuals can possess. This is because you don't understand the difference between concrete things and abstract things. So you say, but it means an enormous humility for the church. So the church really can't have humility, can it? Because it's a group of people. So there may be people in the church with humility, and it would be good if people had that attitude. But obviously you don't have that attitude at all. And you don't have anything enormous either, apart from your ego and your carbon footprint. So I hope that's not what you're hinting at. So you say, but it means an enormous humility for the church, an enormous recognition that whatever it says, with whatever backing of authority and expertise, isn't going to be heard and agreed with, just because it's the church. The Church of England doesn't say anything, does it? Because everybody's got their own opinion, and then everybody has to be discussing everything all the time. So it's not like you could say the Church of England thinks or says. So this doesn't actually make any sense in relation to Anglicanism, does it? Because there isn't an Anglican doctrine on anything. So the Anglican Church hasn't got any authority because there's no agreed doctrine, so you haven't got the backing of any authority when you say anything. You're only speaking in your own right. And by the way, I'm not the only person who's made that point. Lots of people have made that point. One of them being that ecumenical dialogue with the Anglican Communion is very difficult because you can't find points of agreement with the Anglican Communion when it just believes so many different things. Everybody has their own belief, and there's no coherent doctrine which is accepted by the whole church. So you then say, oh, and by the way, you individually haven't got any expertise, really, have you, apart from manipulating people? You haven't got any authority at all because you just lie all the time. So nothing that you say can be relied upon. So you've got no authority. So you then say, we need to earn our right to be listened to by listening, I think. Well, no, it doesn't work like that, you see, Rowan, because you don't actually have any right to be listened to. Nobody has any right to be listened to. You can say what you want to say, but then the people who are hearing what you say decide whether they want to listen to it, pay attention to it. They might just dismiss it. This is what you don't understand, you see. You can't do anything to earn the right to have other people be involved with you in any way, even by listening. And just because you listen to someone or you pretend that you're listening to them, which is more often the case, that doesn't give you the right to be listened to, and particularly not you, because you never talk anything but crap. And you're a bully, an abuser, a psychopath, a narcissist, and you don't have any right to be listened to at all. And you should be thankful I'm giving you all this attention anyway, because as soon as you're in prison, I shan't be giving you a second thought. I really shan't. It's out of sight, out of mind. And the only reason I'm paying you even a shred of attention at the moment, as I said at the beginning when I started making these videos, I was just absolutely sick of listening to all your drivel go unchallenged continuously, and especially when you were threatening and trying to manipulate me quite a lot of the time through things that you said. So I shan't be paying even a shred of attention to you the moment you're in prison, and I shall be too busy with my lover anyway. So that's how it's going to be. So I'm going to make another comment in a minute, and then I'll play my final clips.
How can the church start listening more rather than preaching? I think a church that's doing its job is a place where people can come in the expectation that they will be listened to. I think a church that's doing its job will create the kind of forum, the kind of environment where that's possible. It will encourage its clergy and laity to make those spaces. And of course, it won't just sit and wait for people to come. It'll try and attend to the local community in such a way that it discovers where conversations happen locally and see what can be done to go and be part of that. I'm thinking of, again, back to my days as a bishop in South Wales, and two rather remarkable experiments in the Anglican Church. No, actually, one in the United Reformed Church in South Wales, one in the Anglican Church. Both essentially drop-in centres, cafes in council estates, which were run on the principle that people would come in and be listened to. And There are other contexts, of course, where you look for those places, as I say, where people do go and converse, where people do speak. I think it's crucial for the Church to learn how to discern where those places are, to equip people as best it can to go and do that work. Otherwise, yes, people will feel unheard and understandably resentful. The Church will often feel resentful that it's not getting its message across. And yet, having seen on the ground what that can mean when something else goes forward, I do feel that it's possible for neither of those things to happen, for people to feel heard and for the Church to feel we've said something of what we want to say. But it means an enormous humility for the Church, an enormous recognition that whatever it says with whatever backing of authority and expertise isn't going to be heard and agreed with just because it's the Church. We need to earn our right to be listened to by listening, I think.
Right, so I'm now going to talk about your answer to another question by a member of the audience, a woman who said that she wasn't a theologian, but she was surprised to hear you say earlier that theologians hold that evil is unnatural. And I did mention this in an earlier video. This was something that you talked about in the lecture. I think you were actually trying to insinuate that it's unnatural to abstain from sex. I did mention that before in the context of everything else that you were saying. I think that's what you were driving at. The woman is quite right to be surprised, because as I said in the previous video, that the theologians throughout all the history of the Church have in fact held exactly the opposite to that human nature has a tendency towards sin due to original sin. So she says that she finds reading Mother Julian helpful. That's Julian of Norwich, who was a 14th century mystic, English mystic, and wrote the first book in English, I believe, Revelation of Divine Love. And I will just say briefly, actually, that you are very familiar with Julian of Norwich. And you were on TV quite recently, earlier this year, talking about Julian of Norwich. You were on British TV talking about that. You've given lectures about Julian of Norwich. And it appears that you read Middle English as well. I have read one of the lectures that you gave about her a couple of years ago in Norwich on some anniversary commemorating her. So you're very familiar with Julian of Norwich, and she's a figure in English literature as well as in religion, due to the fact that she wrote this book in the Middle Ages, which was quite unusual, and to be writing in English as well was also unusual at the time. She's a very prominent figure in English literature as well. So this woman says that Mother Julian says that sin is behovely. Now, behovely means useful, and I'm going to put a slideshow on defining this word later on, because you actually say that it means something else. And the woman asking the question also says that self-interest seems entirely natural to her. So you say, what did I mean by saying that sin isn't natural? And I was reminded what Julian of Norwich says, sin is behovely, that is a predictable part of things. Yeah. So you're saying that behovely means a predictable part of things, whereas in fact it means useful. So you've redefined this word. I'm not sure whether it's because you don't know what it means or that you're deliberately redefining it, because you do redefine words, and I've already made a video about that as well, and made other comments about your unusual relationship with language. So you then say, now then, I think what I was trying to say, probably not very clearly, was that there's nothing, first of all, there's nothing inevitable about sin. And you raise your voice here, an octave, not quite an octave actually, and quite quietly, but you're trying to sound authoritative. There's nothing inevitable about sin. This is in the same lecture when you're threatening to kill me if I won't have sex with you. So you say, there's nothing inevitable about sin in the creation God has made, even if there's something rather predictable about it. So predictable and useful are not quite the same thing, and so perhaps one thing that describing sin as behovely might mean is that stealing things is useful because you then have the things, don't you, and you haven't had to go to any real effort to get them. So that would be useful. And also, forcing someone to have sex with you who doesn't want to have sex with you just because you're incredibly narcissistic, and also to save your own skin. That would be behovely as well, wouldn't it? And so, in fact, that's what you were doing in this lecture when this woman asked a question about it. But in fact, there is something very predictable about this because you actually have very rigid patterns of behaviour. So sin for you is not only useful, it's also very predictable because, as I said a couple of videos ago, that you've only got a very limited number of strategies for trying to manipulate the outcome that you want, and you just keep going over and over the same strategies again. So then you say, just as for average sinful people like myself. So you're defining yourself here as an average sinful person rather than a psychopath, an extreme narcissist. You've got the character of a rapist. You've sold your soul to Satan. You're an Illuminati shill. You're a terrorist. And you're describing yourself as an average sinful person. You're not an average sinful person. You're the damned, Rowan. You're the damned. You're not showing any repentance. You won't admit what you've done. You try, and then even worse than that, you say, just as for the average sinful, for average sinful people like myself, and possibly yourself. So you're lumping this woman in who asked the question in the same category as you, and I'd hazard a guess that she's not a terrorist or a psychopath or a narcissist or a rapist or an Illuminati shill, and she probably hasn't sold her soul to Satan either. So quite insulting, really, that you've lumped yourself in with her, who asked such an intelligent question and actually appears no more knowledgeable on the subject than you, because you're deliberately obfuscating anyway, and it's just your usual noise pollution. And also, right at the beginning, when I started making these videos, I did mention that you have several strategies for deflecting criticism. And the first thing you do when someone criticises you is that you say, you're projecting. And then if the person carries on criticising you, like I do, for example, you then say, oh, well, yes, I am that bad, really, but you're just as bad as me. So this is your second strategy here. You move on from the first strategy of projection. You've stopped using that because it just doesn't work anymore. And so this is your second port of call for deflecting criticism from yourself, is to say, oh yes, well, I did do that, I am that bad, I do that, but you're just as bad as me. And so this is what you do, and I've mentioned this before. So you say, I can be pretty confident of sinful action within the next 4 or 5 days. Oh, you sin so infrequently, don't you? That you can only be pretty confident of sinful action within the next 4 or 5 days. This is on the same day when you were threatening to kill me if I didn't have sex with you. So you were committing the sin of attempted rape on this day, and you're saying you could be pretty confident of sinful action within the next 4 or 5 days. And this is after you've redefined the word behovely to mean predictable rather than useful, because obviously it would have been useful if you'd managed to terrorise me into having sex with you. It would have been useful for your ego, and it would have been useful to save your skin as well. It was behovely. So you then say, But none of them are going to be inevitable, and I couldn't predict them now. Well, that's just ridiculous because you were committing them now, weren't you? Even in the question I've just mentioned before. And you're lying here as well, aren't you? So you say, so sin is, in Mother Julian's words, certainly behovely. It happens, it's there. So in Mother Julian's words, certainly sin is behovely, but not it happens, it's there. What she said is, it's useful. So then you say, it's not, however, natural in the sense that it expresses what we most deeply are. Well, I have mentioned this before as well, Rowan, that you have a very Gnostic outlook in life, and you seem to think that your true nature is separate from your evil behaviour. You don't see that one flows from the other. So even though I do all these evil deeds, this is what you're saying, even though I do such evil deeds, this isn't my true nature. Well, that's a Gnostic approach. And in fact, Jesus said that we would know people by their fruits. So your fruits are trying to rape and terrorise people and drive them to suicide and ruin people and ruin nations and ruin every civilization on the earth and all these kinds of things. And you were trying to terrorise me on this very evening because you thought I was in the audience. And you're saying that doesn't express who you really are. Well, it does express who you really are, in fact, because you're a psychopath and an extreme narcissist. You're a bullying, abusive man. You're utterly vile. You're absolutely rotten to the core. So it does express what you most deeply are. This is what you are, and your actions, your evil actions, are the fruit of a ruined soul. And you've made decision after decision throughout your life, which has further ruined you, including selling your soul to Satan. So this is a Gnostic attitude that your evil behaviour doesn't express who you most deeply are, because in fact it does. And so you say, and what I'm trying to get at is the sense that however much our human dignity, our being in the image of God and so forth, is obscured by the stupid, selfish choices we make. Well, your choices, I mean, they are stupid and selfish at one level. But on another level, they're not stupid. In fact, you're very cunning. And most people, because I've had so much experience of your evil behaviour and that of David Peake before you and all the terrible suffering and trauma I was put through in the Church of England, with everybody gaslighting me and saying I was paranoid and oversensitive and it wasn't really that bad, and I read too much into things. In fact, I don't read enough into things because I didn't think the New World Order was behind it all for a start. I didn't think you were a terrorist. I didn't even know that you were behind all these disasters that were happening to me. So your choices are stupid and selfish on one level, but on another level you're very cunning because nobody ever let me know that you were behind all of these things, and it had been going on for about 15 years before I finally realised what was behind it all. So you're not doing that out of stupidity, just stupidity and selfishness. You're not bumbling into it, are you? In fact, you're very calculating, and everything you did was calculated to force me under your control, or to drive me mad, or to force me to kill myself. And all of it was about controlling me. So it wasn't just stupid, selfish choices like you hadn't thought things through and you were just being a bit greedy for yourself, really. You're in fact a very calculating and evil man. So you then say, all of those are adrift away from home. Oh yes, stupid selfish choices are adrift away from home. So that was why I was forced out of my home, because of my stupid selfish choices, like I didn't want to have sex with you and you perverted, abusive bastard, pretend astrophysical associate David Pete. So my choices are stupid and selfish because if only I'd just give you what you want, then I could have what I wanted, couldn't I? Yeah, you could just ruin me like that, couldn't you? And in any case, it's not that straightforward, is it? Because you pretend, oh, you just have to give me this and then it'll all be over. But it'd never be over. You'd never get your talons out of me. You'd finally have me under your control, and you're controlled by Satan. And that's what you want, the ruin of me. It's not just like it'd be one thing and then it would be over. There would be no getting away from you and your malevolent influence. So I haven't made any stupid, selfish choices. In fact, I've made very selfless choices. And let go of things that were very important to me and put up with a lot of crap from a lot of people who, quite frankly, weren't worth it. So um, I hope that I think is what you're saying. All of those are adrift away from home. That was why I was thrown out of my house because of my stupid, selfish choices. Because obviously, refusing someone's sex is the moral equivalent of leaving them battered and bleeding at the side of the road. So then you say, that's one of St Augustine's favourite images. We travel away from home when we sin. So this is what you're trying to tell me, that all these things have happened to me because I've committed a sin, and the sin is not giving you what you want, because that's how you define sin, isn't it? Morality and holiness and all these other things, and sanity and all of this. I mentioned this actually in relation to what you said about the people in South Wales who voted to leave the European Union, and you said that they had this deeply ingrained fear. That was why they did it. And I mentioned this, that you always attribute some defects to people who don't give you what you want and who don't go along with your agenda, who don't agree with you. So. This is just another example of it. You're saying it's because something is defective in me that I've been forced out of my house, when actually the opposite is the case, and I've stood up against a lot of abuse, not only from you, but from a bunch of flaming morons who are so deluded they still think they're helping me. So then you say, and when you said self-interest is natural, absolutely, yes. And the challenge that the Christian vision puts before us is for us to understand that the self in whose interest we must act is a self always involved with the other, that there isn't just a little lump on its own, as it were. So you might be referring to your little tiny lump that you keep trying to get out of your pants. But I really haven't got any use for tiny little floppy things anyway that are invisible to the naked eye. So you obviously thought that I was in the audience, and then this self that we must act in the interest of, according to you, is always involved with the other, that there isn't just a little lump on its own, as it were. Well, I'm not going to be always involved with you, and in fact, I'm not involved with you at all, and I wouldn't be bothering with you at all if you forced me into this situation. You wanted my attention so much, you hounded me around the country and around foreign countries and everywhere I went for decades. And so you've now got my attention, and it's not my problem if you don't like the kind of attention that I'm giving you. So I'm just telling you how it is, and I don't really care what you think about that. So, as I said last Friday, zip your trousers up and fuck off. So I'll leave it there for this evening because it's quite late. So I want to get my video uploaded and assembled and everything, but I am keeping an eye on your whereabouts, and I will be turning up to arrest you. And don't forget my offer to kick you in the balls. I'm still polishing my steel toe caps every day, but obviously in every other respect I'm saving myself for my beloved, because he's so wonderful and we're made for each other. So I hope you have a nice weekend and keep practicing the Yorkshire puddings, and tip me the wink if you want me to kick you in the balls. I'm very keen. So I'll leave it there now. Hasta la próxima.
like this. Yeah. I've got a question about sin. I'm not a theologian, so I was surprised to hear you say earlier on that theologians hold that evil is unnatural. I've found great comfort in what Mother Julian said about sin is behovely. And I'd just like to hear what you have to say about that. I think that self-interest seems entirely natural to me.
That's a very, very interesting question about sin. What did I mean by saying that sin isn't natural? And I was reminded of what Julian of Norwich says. Sin is behovely, that is predictable part of things. Yeah. Now then, I think what I was trying to say, probably not very clearly, was that there's nothing inevitable about sin in the creation God has made, even if there's something rather predictable about it. Just as for average sinful people like myself and possibly yourself, I can be pretty confident of sinful actions within the next 4 or 5 days, but none of them are going to be inevitable, and I couldn't predict them now. So sin is, in Mother Julian's words, certainly behovely. It happens, it's there. It's not, however, natural in the sense that it expresses what we most deeply are. And what I'm trying to get at is a sense that however much our human dignity, our being in the image of God and so forth is obscured by the stupid, selfish choices we make, all of those are adrift away from home. That's one of St. Augustine's favourite images. You know, we travel away from home when we sin. And when you said self-interest is natural, absolutely yes. And the challenge that the Christian vision puts before us is for us to understand that the self in whose interest we must act is a self always involved with the other, that there isn't just a little lump on its own, as it were. It will encourage its clergy and laity to make those spaces. And of course, it won't just sit and wait for people to come. The church will often feel resentful that it's not getting its message across. It used to be said, and perhaps it's still said, that if the Communist Party of Great Britain had had the geographical network and the resources that the Christian Church, and particularly the Church of England, has in these islands, we would have been a Stalinist dictatorship many years ago. Yes, I found myself, like so many others, feeling rather stunned the morning after the referendum, and wondering where we were going and what country I now lived in. The fact is, of course, that whatever we say in this overblown opinion poll called a referendum, we are actually involved with one another in ways that are not going to be torn up quick. Of course, discussing climate change will get us into discussing what democracy means sooner or later in a very acute and possibly uncomfortable way.
Don't try to change me, you're wasting your time. Now I got something much better in mind. Robert De Niro's waiting, talking Italian.
why Catholics have the best sex.
Adelante.